All right, let's talk about it. The R word, recession. Is it coming? Is it here? What's the deal? Well, I think the more important thing and the word we really need to be addressing is the crash. Is the crash coming? I'm waiting for the crash. All these things. I hear these terms getting thrown around, and so many people are mentioning the impending crash. So I think we need to address that and talk about that. And what does that mean? Right? So first couple things we need to talk about is, number one, housing crisis and recession are not synonymous, right? That's only really been one time in the history of our economy where a recession resulted in a housing crisis, and that was in 2008 when housing created the recession, right? So the mortgages that have been written since then are some of the most highly regulated, most qualified, and the most due diligence has been done in the history of mortgages. So the most stable mortgages that have ever been written, meaning housing is on a very different bedrock than it was in the last recession. Now, that being said, aside from that one time in 2008, housing does very well in a recession. You can look back at the charts. Every time we have a recession, housing does incredibly well. It's one of the most stable parts of the economy through these recessions over time. Now, we're also dealing with record shortages in housing. So what do we know about supply and demand? If there's no supply and there's a high demand, it's going to create this floor of support where housing prices and things like that aren't going to drop too much. They may correct in some of the overpriced neighborhoods. If you're looking at something and saying, man, that's incredibly unreasonable that that person's house sold for $700 and now this person's trying to sell it for $750 tomorrow, you are going to see some corrections in those, but that's not a housing crash. That's people getting realistic and coming back down to earth and starting to price homes at where maybe they should be priced and being more reasonable as sellers. So that frenzy's over. That ship has left the harbor. Train has left the station. Those days are gone. So what is going to affect housing? You know, we mentioned that there's some of the most qualified mortgages that have ever been written. What is going to affect housing? Well, a lot of those mortgages that were written are dual income households. And when you look out at this, kind of post-COVID economy, a lot of the companies that kept the economy afloat were, the gig type employment, tech, some of our information type companies. They were really supplying a lot of the jobs and kind of propping up our economy during the COVID era. And now that it's coming to an end, you're seeing these record layoffs, not just in the real estate sector, which is getting, obviously is contracting quite a bit, but in the tech sector, the technological hardware, medical, all these different fields are compressing, and you're seeing these huge layoffs. Amazon laying off 100,000 people. Some of the other big tech companies like Tesla and other companies laying off 5 and 10% of their entire workforce. These are big numbers, and these may be people that were part of dual income households that bought their houses. So, as advisors, if you're in an advisory role, or if you're a client or a potential buyer yourself, we have to be looking at this landscape and say, how is this going to affect me? How's it going to affect my opportunities? How's it going to affect my clients, my friends, my family, whatever it is? And that's, I think, where you're going to see the next wave of inventory. Right now, we're seeing a lot of inventory hit the market, and these are people that were sitting on the fence and they were waiting for, whatever they were waiting for. Hey, I'll get around to it. I'll sell it at the top. And now they're seeing the ride start to slow down, and now they're jumping on and trying to get their houses sold. And obviously, they're sitting for longer. Rates are up. People aren't as motivated to get in on the low rate situation that they had before. So now the sellers are having to be more reasonable. Now, 2008, we dealt with a lot of distressed sellers, right? Distressed sales, short sales, foreclosures. We have record appreciation rates over the last several years. People have equity. You're not going to see a lot of short sales and foreclosures because they can sell and you usually net a little bit of money out of that or a lot of money out of it and move on and do what they're going to do. So right now we're seeing the people that are trying to get in on the tail end and get their houses sold and make their adjustments. But you may not see a lot of distressed sales, but you may see some stressed out sellers being really motivated to sell their homes. If you are a dual income household and you qualified at a 45% debt ratio, if you need to know what that means, just message me. But let's say you had two incomes of 100,000, and when you qualified, that was a combined ratio of 45%. Well, if you lose one of those $100,000 incomes, now you're at a 90% debt ratio, meaning 90% of the money that you have coming in before taxes goes to all of your hard expenses, your mortgage, your auto, your student loans, your credit cards. That's only leaving you 10% to survive. And it's just not going to be feasible. And even with the support you might get from unemployment, if that person doesn't get immediate employment at or above the same level of income they had before, it's going to make staying in that house very difficult. Now they're going to have options to sell, but it's going to create some opportunities for buyers that are now looking for somebody that is a motivated and reasonable seller that is willing to come to the table and negotiate to get that house sold, so they can get out from under it, they can relocate, they can move down, they can find something more affordable. And you're gonna see more and more of that inventory coming on the market. So a little bit of our supply and demand problem is gonna be equalized, which will result in a little bit of competitiveness between sellers. Now we just came out of 2 years where it was extremely competitive amongst buyers, which is ratcheting things up. Now you're gonna see a lot of competitiveness amongst sellers, which is going to maybe correct some of those values down. Houses are going to sell at what they're worth. They're not going to get these grossly, undervalued purchase prices like you did in 2008 because of everything that was going on. But you're going to see some corrections. You're going to be able to get some sellers to play ball and maybe even, gain a little bit or have an opportunity to work with those sellers. So that's what I would be looking out for. I would be following the news, seeing where the layoffs are occurring, finding out where some of those people maybe work and live. And then I would be looking at some of those neighborhoods that you want to hone in on. If you're a potential buyer, if you're looking to move up or move down, you can kind of set your targets on that. If you are in an advisor role, if you're a financial planner or a realtor or something like that, you need to be looking at this and going back and looking through your clients for the last couple of years and seeing, hey, this person works for Amazon or whoever's laying these people off. They just laid off 100,000 people. I should check in on those people and see where they're at, because the sooner we can get them some good advice, the sooner we can address their potential problem, the better off financially they're going to be, and we have a responsibility to do that for people. If you have any questions or need anything else related to this, obviously we just scratched the surface a little tiny bit on this topic, but I'm happy to help. I'm happy to offer any advice and talk you guys through it. In particular, just reach out to us. We're always here for you. See you next time.